Hello, my dear students. Today we are going to discuss Economics Class 10 Chapter 2 Sectors of the Indian Economy by the NCERT. Sectors of the Indian Economy. भारतीय अर्थव्यवस्था के क्या क्या सेक्टर्स हैं, आज हम लोग इसके ऊपर चर्चा करेंगे और इस चैप्टर को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे। तो आप लोग तैयार हैं? चलिए फिर सेक्टर्स ऑफ द इंडियन इकोनॉमी को जानते हैं, समझते हैं। इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज। इकोनॉमिक्स में दो तरह की एक्टिविटीज के बारे में हम लोग चर्चा करते हैं, एक इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज और दूसरी नॉन इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज। Economic activities are those activities which create income. Economics is the science of wealth. अर्थशास्त्र धन का विज्ञान है। Sectors of the economic activities. All the economic activities have been divided into three sectors. What are these sectors? How to define these sectors? What are the examples of these sectors we are going to discuss now. There are three sectors of the economic activities. Number one, the primary sector activities. Number two, the secondary sector activities. And number three, the tertiary sector activities. We are going to discuss about all these activities one by one. The first sector of economic activity is the primary sector activity. And agriculture production comes under the primary sector activity. Why? Because it produces natural goods. Agriculture produces goods in their natural form. And that is why this is called the primary sector activity. It is also called the production sector activity. The examples are agriculture, dairy, fishing, forestry, etc. As we see here, 27.2% contribution of the GDP of India is from the primary sector activities, primary sector of economic activities, and 60.5% of working population of our country is engaged in the primary sector activities. I hope this is clear to all of you. The primary sector activities. I repeat once again, the primary sector activities produce goods in their original form, in their primary form. Example is, of course, agriculture. Whatever is produced by agriculture, it is in original form. Wheat, original form. Wheat produced by agriculture, it is original form, but from wheat we manufacture flour. Hope you got? That's good. The second sector of activities in economics is the secondary sector activities. Under the secondary sector activities, industrial manufacturing comes, and this manufacturing sector produces manufactured goods. We can say that the secondary sector utilizes the products of the primary sector and manufacture them into manufactured products, manufactured goods. Industries of different kinds, for example, automobiles, carpentry, etc., come under the secondary sector activities. And 23.7% contribution is in GDP by this sector, I mean the secondary sector. 16.8% of the working population of our country is engaged in the secondary sector activities. The secondary sector activities are also called the manufacturing sector activities. The third sector of activities is famous as the tertiary sector activities. These are also called the service sector activities. This sector of activities helps to develop other two sectors, I mean the primary sector and the secondary sector. This tertiary sector actually connects the primary sector activities to the secondary sector activities. Example, banking, insurance, transport, etc. 49% contribution is in the GDP of our country by this sector. 27.7% of working population of our country is engaged in the tertiary sector activities. How do we count the total production in each sector? I mean, how do we count the total production in primary sector, in secondary sector, and in tertiary sector? Now we are going to discuss this also. The value of goods and services in the three sectors, I mean the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector, are calculated and then added up. I mean to say here that the value of the goods and services in the primary sector, the value of the goods and services in the secondary sector, the value of the goods and services in the tertiary sectors are calculated and then added up to find the total production. By the value of goods and services, what do we find here? The sum of the total production in the three sectors, I mean the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. I mean the production sector, the manufacturing sector, and the service sector. Okay, these are sum up, and then the sum gives what do we call the GDP of a country. One thing is clear here. We have to add three things. And what are the three things? The sum of the production in the three sectors. The sum of the production in the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. Or we can say the sum of the production in the primary sector means production sector, secondary sector means manufacturing sector, and the tertiary sector means the service sector. And when we add them up, then that gives the GDP of our country. Now, who calculates this GDP of our country? And the answer is a central government machinery undertakes the work of calculating the GDP, the gross domestic product of our country, the gross domestic production of our country. And that central government machinery is called the CSO, the Central Statistical Organization. Three sectors are highly interdependent: the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. All the three sectors help one another. The primary sector produces. Whatever is produced by the primary sector, the secondary sector utilizes that thing as the raw material and it manufactures. This is also called manufacturing sector, the secondary sector. And the tertiary sector, the service sector, it provides services to the primary sector and to the secondary sector. It supports the production sector and the manufacturing sector. We can also say it supports the system of production, it supports the system of manufacturing. That is how we say that the three sectors, the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector, are highly interdependent. Comparing the three sectors, comparing the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. Activities in the three sectors produce a very large number of goods and services. On the basis of their production, we compare them. Comparing the three sectors. Let us see how do we compare the three sectors, the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. In an economy, one or more sectors can be dominant in terms of employment and production. In terms of employment and production, we have to take note of two things here. Number one, employment, and number two, production, because these two things are going to help us in comparing the three sectors of economic activities. How do we count various goods and services and know the total production in each sector? Economists suggest that the values of goods and services should be used rather than adding up the actual numbers. If we add up the actual numbers of the services and goods produced by each sector, we may not get the right answer. We may not get the right conclusion. That is why it is said that the values of goods and services, the values, I repeat, the values of goods and services should be used and must be used, because this gives the clear picture. Values of goods and services should be used, final goods and services. Then the question comes, what do we understand by the final goods and services? Such goods as are ready for consumption and need no further processing are called final goods and services. The goods and services which are absolutely ready for the use, they are called the final goods and services. At this stage, the goods and services do not require further processing. Okay? That is the most important thing about the final goods and services and the national income. A good that the final consumer consumes is consumer good. Values of goods and services should be used. Intermediate goods and services. Goods used up in processing final goods and services are called intermediate goods and services. Why? Because they intermediate, ये मध्यस्थता का काम करते हैं. किस चीज में ये काम करते हैं? ये इसमें काम करते हैं कि फाइनल गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज कैसे प्रोड्यूस किए जाएं. The value of final goods already includes the value of all the intermediate goods that are used in making the final good. I hope this is clear to all of you. That's good. एक साल के भीतर किसी भी सेक्टर के द्वारा जितने भी गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज का प्रोडक्शन होता है, उसके मॉनेटरी वैल्यू को हम लोग ऐड कर लेते हैं और इस तरह से जब तीनों सेक्टर के गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज के मॉनेटरी वैल्यू को ऐड कर लेते हैं तब हमें जीडीपी प्राप्त हो जाता है। द जीडीपी कैलकुलेशन, हाउ डू वी कैलकुलेट द जीडीपी? We have to remember here one thing. The monetary value of all final goods and services produced in each sector during a particular year provides the total production of the sector for that year. Whatever is the value of all the final goods and services produced in the primary sector during a particular year, the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in the secondary sector during a particular year, the monetary value of all final goods and services produced in the service sector during a particular year, these three are added up, and whatever comes is the GDP of the country, of a country. It means the sum of production in the three sectors, I mean the primary sector, the secondary sector and the tertiary sector, gives the GDP of a country. The GDP is the value of all final goods and services produced within a country during a particular year. We have to do very simple thing. We have to calculate the monetary value of all the goods and services produced in a particular year by a sector of activity, like the primary sector, the secondary sector, the tertiary sector. And then the monetary value of all these three sectors are to be added up. Whatever we get is the GDP of the country. Historical change in sectors. Since beginning, we have witnessed a historical change, a significant change in the three sectors, the primary sector, the secondary sector and the tertiary sector in most of the countries in the world. Let us see how that has changed. The primary sector, employment and production. The secondary sector, employment and production. Tertiary sector, employment and production. We have to consider the record of the previous 100 years. Primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in our country. Let us see what is the situation. Rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. This is graph number 1, and it clearly indicates that from 1970-71 to 2010-2011, there is marvelous, significant rise in the tertiary sector performance. The pink one is the tertiary sector, the yellow one is the secondary sector, and the green one is the primary sector, and the values are given in rupees, in crores. If we observe this graph, we find that the maximum amount of growth is there in the tertiary sector, and then in the secondary sector, and then in the primary sector. From 1970-71 to 2010-2011, there is significant rise in the performance of the tertiary sector in comparison to the secondary sector and the primary sector. Rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. This is graph number 2. It indicates the share of sectors in GDP, gross domestic production, in percentage. In 1970-71, to 2010-2011. Again, the pink one is the tertiary sector, the yellow one is the secondary sector, and the green one is the primary sector. In 1970-71, the situation, it's very clear in percentage, okay? Rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. This is graph number 2, share of sectors in GDP in percentage. And when we observe this graph, we come to know that as far as the GDP in percentage is concerned, here also the tertiary sector has improved its performance in comparison to the secondary sector, in comparison to the primary sector. Rising importance of the tertiary sector in production, graph number 3, it indicates the share of sectors in employment in percentage. And when we see this graph, again, in 1970-71, the share of tertiary sector in employment was less, and it has indicated, it has shown a significant progress in 2009-2010. It has increased in a significant way in comparison to the secondary sector and in comparison to the primary sector. The tertiary sector becomes so important. Why? Because the tertiary sector, the service sector, has been working as a bridge between the primary sector and the secondary sector, the production sector and the manufacturing sector. Reasons. There are some reasons for the increasing importance of the tertiary sector or the service sector. Number one, the government in developing countries have given importance to the basic services of means of transport, communication, okay, money, banking, insurance, and so on. The second thing is development of the primary sector and the secondary sector. One thing is very important here. The development of the primary sector, I mean the production sector. The development of the secondary sector, I mean the manufacturing sector. Both have strengthened, both have enriched the tertiary sector, the service sector. Number 3, rise in income, rise in demand of better and more services. People, whether they are in the rural area or they are in the urban area in any part of the world, in any part of our country, they need basic but good quality services. Good quality services of transport, communication, banking, insurance, and so on. The fourth point is new IT services. Important and essential too. The new information technology services are essential part of our life today. Without information technology, it has become, without information technology, it has become very difficult to move on. The situation of COVID-19, the situation of pandemic has proved that the service sector is a must in everyone's life, whether the life is in the rural area or in the urban area in any part of the world. The fifth point is rising living standards encourage more than job. Rising living standard. People want to show improvement in their living standard, their income increasing. So they want to spend more and more on service sector so that they can save time and they can get good quality, better quality of goods and services on time. And in this field, the service sector provides all facilities on time, but not all parts of the tertiary sector are growing equally. Role of tertiary sector in Indian economy. Let's discuss this thing also. Tertiary sector and the Indian economy. This is part number 1. Point number 1 is the new economic policy 1991. This policy was very famous. LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. Number 2, share of tertiary sector in the GDP is growing very fast. We can see here in 1973, it was 35 to 40% in the GDP, which increased to 50 to 60% in 2003. Point number 3, the share of tertiary sector in employment is also growing. It was 10 to 15% in 1973 and it became 20 to 22% in 2003. Point number 4, the tertiary sector increases efficiency of the primary sector, efficiency of the secondary sector. I mean efficiency of the production sector and efficiency of the manufacturing sector. And that is how it affects the all-round development of the personality of any citizen in any part of the world. It improves the work culture, it improves the lifestyle. Point number 5, provides people necessary knowledge and information. Service sector is very quick, very fast in providing latest knowledge. Internet, radio, television, newspapers, you can say electronic media and print media. They provide all information on our fingertips. Wherever we are having our library. On whatever topic we want to know, we can know in no time. That is the magic of the service sector, the tertiary sector. The reasons are, number 1, rising per capita income. Number 2, increasing value of time. Number 3, growing medical facilities. Number 4, demand of medical care for elderly people. Number 5, demand of better educational facilities to all levels of people. So these are the reasons which make tertiary sector more and more important as far as giving employment to the people is concerned. Where are most of the people employed? Definitely the primary sector. More than half of the workers in the country, I mean our country India, are employed in the primary sector, producing only a quarter of the GDP. What is important here? The important thing is more than 50% of the workers in our country are employed in the primary sector, but they contribute only 25% of the GDP. That is really very, very strange, a matter of concern. The secondary sector and the tertiary sector, what is the position here? These two sectors, okay, they produce 3/4 of the total production, but they employ less than half of the people. This is strange here also. We must note these 2 points. We must keep in mind these 2 points. Remarkable fact about India. There has been a change in the share of the 3 sectors in the gross domestic production. A similar shift has not taken place in employment. The importance of the three sectors have changed as far as their contribution in the GDP is concerned, but the kind of change that has appeared in the contribution of the GDP has not appeared in giving employment opportunities to the people. That is the matter of concern for all of us. Remarkable fact about our country. Primary sector continues to be the largest employer even now, and the reasons are not enough jobs were created in the secondary and tertiary sector. This is the graph that shows, that is graph number 3, share of sectors in employment in percentage 1970-71 and 2009-2010. This indicates the scenario in a very, very clear-cut way. In the primary sector, the percentage of employment has reduced. In the secondary sector, the percentage in employment has increased, but not satisfactorily. In the tertiary sector, of course, there is a big rise, but that also is not up to the mark. Remarkable fact about India. This is about the secondary sector we are marking here. The secondary sector production of goods went up by 9 times during this period, but employment went up around 3 times only. The share of sectors in employment but in production, in employment but in percentage. If we see this, the percentage term, okay, the primary sector, it has reduced, the secondary sector, it has increased, the tertiary sector, it has increased. Of course, in the tertiary sector, the highest percentage of increase is visible, but that also is not up to the mark, not satisfactory. Remarkable fact about India. Again here, the tertiary sector. Let us focus on the tertiary sector. Production of goods went up by 14 times during this period, but employment went up around 5 times only, 14 times and 5 times. As far as production of goods and services in the tertiary sector is concerned, in 1970-71, it increased 14 times, but as far as employment opportunities are concerned, they increased only 5 times. So that is also not satisfactory. What does it indicate? It indicates a lot of things, but few things are very important. More people in agriculture than it is necessary. It means on agriculture, it means on primary sector, it means on the production sector, there is heavy load of employment. Even if we remove some people out, production is not going to be affected. It means it is the case of underemployment. More than required number of people are involved in production. That is affecting the GDP and the employment opportunities also, of course. Underemployment. What is underemployment? It is a situation where people are apparently working, but all of them are made to work less than their potential. 5 people are required, 7 people are involved. So 2 people are not required, but they are involved. This is what? Underemployment. Number 1, overqualification or over-education. This is reason number 1 for underemployment. Number 2, involuntary part-time work. That is also a reason. Number 3, overstaffing or hidden disguised unemployment or labor hoarding. People are unemployed in big number, they don't get any job, so they think it's better we do something, we do contribute where others are contributing. That is increasing the situation of underemployment. How can more employment be created in service sector? There are some methods to create more and more opportunities, job opportunities in the service sector, in the tertiary sector. Strengthening employment potential in education sector, health sector, tourism sector, transport sector, and other service sectors. Steps for employment generation in primary and secondary sector. Number 1, promote rural non-farm activities. Number 2, encourage small scale and cottage industries. Number 3, go for rapid and heavy industrialization. Number 4, increase irrigation facilities. Number 5, easy credit facilities. If we take these steps, then these steps are going to generate, employment opportunities in the primary and secondary sector, in the production and manufacturing sectors. Role of service sector in Indian economy. What is the role of service sector or tertiary sector in the economy of our country? There are 6 points. Number 1, the tertiary sector supports the primary and secondary sectors. Number 2, the tertiary sector or the service sector creates employment opportunities. Number 3, the service sector contributes to national income. Number 4, the service sector provides basic services. Number 5, the service sector adds to comforts and leisure. Number 6, the service sector increases exports and improves image of the country. These are the important role played by the service sector, the tertiary sector in the Indian economy. Comparison, primary, secondary and tertiary sector. As far as employment in India is concerned, this data has been given by the NSSO. In 1950-51, 73% in primary sector, 10% in secondary sector and 17% in tertiary sector. In 1990-91, 67% in primary sector, 12% in secondary sector, 21% in tertiary sector. In 2001-2002, 61% in primary sector, 17% in secondary sector, and 22% in tertiary sector. In 2011-2012, 48.9% in primary sector, 24.3% in secondary sector, and 26.8% in the tertiary sector or service sector. What do we observe here? In the primary sector, the percentage is decreasing, and in the secondary and tertiary sector, the percentage is increasing as far as the contribution of the 3 sectors in employment in India is concerned. Comparison, primary, secondary and tertiary sector. Now, regarding the GDP in India by the NSSO, in the year 1950-51, the contribution in the GDP by the primary sector was 55%, by the secondary sector was 16%, and by the tertiary sector was 29.33%. In 2000-2001, the primary sector contributed 26%, the secondary sector contributed 25%, and the tertiary sector contributed 49% in the GDP. And in 2011-2012, the primary sector contributed 20.5%, secondary sector contributed 24.6%, and tertiary sector contributed 54.9% in the GDP of our country, India. If we observe this table, very carefully, the contribution of primary sector in the GDP is showing a gradual decrease, while the secondary and tertiary sector indicating gradual increase. But one thing we observe here, there is rapid increase in the share of tertiary sector contribution in the GDP. That is very, very significant, very, very important. That indicates the increasing role of tertiary sector as far as contribution in the GDP is concerned. Growth of service sector in India, increasing share in employment, that is 16% in 1970-71 to 22% in 2001-2002. Its increasing share in GDP, 33.5% in 1950-51 to 54.9% in 2011-2012. Increasing share in export, 10th largest exporter in the world in 2005, India has got this position. Increasing share in new type of services, that is IT and tourism, India has made fast and quality progress in the world. Increasing share in number of service providers in airlines, banks, telecom services, and so many fields. India has shown this significant, marvelous, important progress. All these 5 things indicate the growth of service sector in India. NREGA 2005, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005. It was renamed as MNREGA, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. It was first proposed in 1991 by Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao, Pamulapati Venkata Narasimha Rao. It was accepted in the Parliament and commenced implementation. 625 districts as pilot project. 1st April 2008, scoped up to cover all districts in India. World Development Report by the World Bank 2014 has reported that it is, Manrega is stellar example of rural development in the entire world. It's a very, very important step by the government of India. Very, very significant step by the government of India. It is also called right to work. The mission statement of NREGA is, it aims to enhance livelihood and security in rural areas by providing at least 100 days of wage employment in a financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. This is the mission statement of NREGA or Manrega. NREGA is a labor law and social security measure. We have already stated that, and it has 5 aims. Number 1, to guarantee the right to work. Number 2, to enhance livelihood security. Number 3, to provide at least 100 days of wage of employment in a financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. Number 4, employment allowances if the government fails to provide 100 days of wage of employment in a financial year. Number 5, work that help to increase production from land. These are the 5 major aims and objectives of NREGA, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act 2005, or Right to Work 2005. Unemployment. What is unemployment? Willingness to work, abilities to work, but no work. This situation is called unemployment. Unemployment, and under the unemployment, we are going to discuss underemployment. Then what is underemployment? The definition of underemployment is a person gets employment for a few months and remains unemployed for some months. It means working below abilities is underemployment. Unemployment, another is disguised unemployment. Then what is disguised unemployment? A state in which more people are engaged in a given job than actually required. If some of them are withdrawn from that job, it will not lead to fall in the total output. This is disguised unemployment. Unemployment. Seasonal unemployment. What is seasonal unemployment? The name itself reflects its meaning, its sense. A temporary window of time where the number of available employment opportunities decrease. In other words, we can say it occurs when people are unemployed at particular time of the year when demand for labor is lower than usual. Division of sectors as organized and unorganized. Organized sector, unorganized sector. In organized sector, we find high salaries, job security, less working hours, paid holidays and benefits, sound working conditions, provision for overtime and allowances. On the other hand, in unorganized sector, we find low salaries, no job security, long working hours, no such benefits, no benefits of paid holidays and other benefits, poor working conditions, and no provision for allowances and overtime. So, there are many differences between employment in organized sector and unorganized sector of employment. Sectors in terms of ownership. Now we are going to discuss this also. India is a mixed economy. We have the features of capitalist economy and the socialist economy in our economy. That is why we do call our economy as the mixed economy. And in the mixed economy of India, the first sector is the public sector as far as ownership is concerned, ownership of production and distribution system. The first is public sector, and the example is Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and Steel Authority of India Limited, SEL. This sector is owned and controlled by the government. The system of production and distribution in this sector is owned and controlled by the government. The production, profit making, and social welfare both are the objectives here. Prices are determined largely by the government, and the objective of this sector is public welfare. Number 2, private sector, and the examples are TISCO, Tata Iron and Steel Company, and RIL, Reliance India Limited. The system of production and distribution in this sector is owned and controlled by individual or group of individuals. The production, profit motive only, their only objective is to go for maximum profit with minimum expenditure. Prices are determined by demand and supply, market forces. And objective of the private sector is minimum expenditure and maximum profit. Number 3, joint sector, and the example is Maruti Udyog Limited, owned and operated by the state and individuals or group of individuals. Objective is to support industrialization and eliminate the negative points in both public and private sectors. Number 4, cooperative sector, Amul, that is Anandnagar Milk Union Limited and Sudha, owned and operated by the producers or suppliers of raw materials, workers or both, and the objective of cooperative sector is to promote cooperative ventures in the country. So these are the 4 sectors in the mixed economy of India as far as the ownership of production system is concerned. Government has to invest in developing infrastructure. What kind of infrastructure? The 5 things are: number 1, energy; number 2, transport; number 3, communication; number 4, education; and number 5, health and other facilities. Contribution of public sector in economic development of India. There are 5 big contributions of the public sector in the economic development of India, and the 5 points are: controlled by the government, objective of welfare, beneficial in heavy industries, transport and communication, health and education. So these are the 5 major contribution of the public sector in the economic development of India. The contribution of public sector in economic development of India is very, very crucial, very, very important. My dear students, I hope all of you have understood this chapter very well. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Please do wear mask. मास्क जरूर पहनिए, 2 गज की दूरी जरूर रखिए, अपने आप को सेफ रखिए, सुरक्षित रखिए. Keep fit and fine, and please do take care of your good health and good studies. Thank you very much. God bless you all.